I don't know what hour it is. Time doesn't move right here. I only know how many shells have gone over since midnight, and how many times I've checked the sky for a light that isn't coming yet. The sand never settles. Even when the guns pause, it drifts down on us like snow, fine, black, and warm. It gets into your mouth, your ears, the crease of your eyes. I've brushed my rifle clean 3 times already, and it's dirty again. Everything here is dirty again the moment you touch it. The smell won't leave either. Sulfur, burnt powder, something sour underneath it all that I don't want to name. When the wind shifts, it comes up stronger, straight from the mountain. We're told the Japanese are still under there, listening, waiting, just like we are. No one sleeps. You lie still and pretend, counting the hours until dawn because it gives your hands something to do. 1 hour. Another. I keep thinking morning is supposed to mean safety, but here it only means we stand up again. Somewhere to my left, artillery walks inland, slow and steady. Each concussion presses the air out of my chest, then gives it back. The ground shakes like it's breathing. I write this low, with my helmet pulled down, because it feels better than waiting. If daylight comes the way I think it will, this may be the last quiet I get. And I can't shake the feeling that when the sun rises over this island, it won't be morning at all. It'll be the start of dying. The battle unfolding in that darkness was not fought for symbolism, and it was not planned as a morale exercise. Iwo Jima mattered because of geography and mathematics. Cold calculations made thousands of miles away. By early 1945, American B-29 bombers were striking Japan from the Mariana Islands. The missions were long, punishing flights, and damage or fuel loss meant crews often had nowhere to go. Iwo Jima sat directly along that flight path. Its airfields would become emergency landing grounds, places where crippled bombers could land, crews could survive, and aircraft could be returned to service. By war's end, more than 2,000 B-29s would make emergency landings there. What awaited the Marines, however, was unlike anything they had faced before. Japanese General Tadamichi Kuribayashi rejected the traditional doctrine of massed banzai charges. Instead, he built a defense meant to bleed the invasion slowly and relentlessly. Beneath the volcanic rock lay miles of tunnels, bunkers, and firing positions engineered to survive naval bombardment and allow defenders to disappear, relocate, and strike again. When American troops advanced, the enemy was rarely in front of them. He was underneath them. This reality shattered pre-battle assumptions. U.S. planners expected Iwo Jima to fall in a matter of days. Casualty projections were based on earlier island campaigns, where Japanese forces had fought visibly and collapsed quickly once beachheads were secured. On Iwo Jima, there was no visible collapse, only resistance that re-emerged after every advance. For decades, the battle would be remembered primarily for a single photograph taken on Mount Suribachi. But that image, powerful as it is, obscures a harder truth. Iwo Jima was not just a flag-raising island. It was one of the most methodically defended pieces of ground in the Pacific War, and the cost of underestimating it would be paid hour by hour, yard by yard, by the men counting time in the dark. The sand eats everything. It gets into the action of your rifle and grinds when you work the bolt. It fills your pockets, your socks, the seams of your clothes. You can clean your weapon until your fingers go numb, and 5 minutes later, it's useless again. We joke about it, because if we don't, someone's going to start yelling. Harris keeps tapping his magazine against his helmet, trying to shake the grit out. O'Donnell swears his trigger feels heavier every time he pulls it. I don't argue. My hands are so tired I can barely tell where the metal ends and I begin. The tanks tried to move up this morning. They sank almost immediately, tracks churning, engines screaming like animals caught in mud. A flamethrower team went forward instead. The man with the tank hunched low like he's carrying the weight of the whole island. When the fire came out, it roared louder than anything I've heard yet. For a moment, you could pretend you knew where the enemy was. Then the firing started again from somewhere else. That's the worst part. You don't see them. You hear a shot, a burst, and someone drops, and there's nothing to fire back at. The ground opens and closes on them. 1 minute it's quiet, the next it's rifles and machine guns from places that didn't exist a second ago. Jenkins hasn't said much since yesterday. He just sits there, wiping his glasses, over and over, even though they're already clean. I asked him if he slept. He shook his head. None of us did. We're not charging anything. We're crawling, stopping, waiting. Every yard costs more than the last. There's no glory in it. Just wait. Weight in your arms, your legs, your chest, and the feeling that the island is watching us from underneath, patient, letting the sand do its work. Iwo Jima was unlike any battlefield the Marines had faced before. As historian Richard B. Frank notes, the Japanese defense was not a mindless banzai onslaught, but a carefully engineered system designed to exact maximum casualties and delay the American advance. General Tadamichi Kuribayashi transformed the island into a fortress of tunnels, bunkers, and camouflaged positions hidden beneath volcanic rock, impervious to naval bombardment, and connected in a way that allowed defenders to strike, disappear, and reappear elsewhere. This approach shattered the assumptions underlying previous amphibious operations in the Pacific. At Tarawa or Saipan, U.S. forces could often expect the enemy to be visible on the beaches, to collapse once the shore was taken. On Iwo Jima, the enemy vanished into the island itself, turning every advance into a fight against both terrain and hidden forces. What looked like silence was often death waiting below. For decades, popular accounts overstated the notion that Japanese soldiers fought purely out of fanaticism. The reality was far more calculated. Kuribayashi's men had studied American tactics, fortified positions with interlocking fields of fire, and used the volcanic terrain to their advantage. Every attack the Marines made had been anticipated in some form, yet planners still underestimated the scale of resistance, leading to the staggering casualties that would follow. This deliberate, modern, and layered defense left even seasoned officers questioning their own strategies. It reframed the Pacific campaign. Iwo Jima was not just a step toward Japan, but a lesson in how industrial-era warfare could meet traditional island combat and how assumptions, no matter how well informed, could cost lives. Knowing what we now understand about Kuribayashi's defense, do you think U.S. generals at the time fully understood what awaited them? How would you have planned differently? I counted the hours again, one by one, watching the dark stretch like a clock with no hands. 1, 2, 3, bay. Every minute felt longer than the last, and I kept my pen close, scratching words I may never get to send. I wrote it down quietly, just in case this is the last thing I write. I don't want anyone to think I was brave. I was scared, bone deep, and I know every man around me is too. We whisper names, shake hands, and swap cigarettes like we're trading charms against what's coming. Then, before I even realized dawn had arrived, the island announced itself. Artillery roared like a living thing. The ground jumped under me, and sand and ash rained down from the sky. The smell of gunpowder and sulfur mixed with the cold morning air, and my heart skipped each beat in time with the bombardment. We scrambled for cover, and the men around me moved as shadows. I could hear Harris breathing fast, Jenkins muttering prayers under his breath, O'Donnell clenching his rifle so tight his knuckles were white. I could tell by the sound of it the same way I tell by the clock that the sun was up. But morning didn't feel like hope. It felt like the signal that the island was ready, and so were we, whether we wanted to be or not. Every hour I had counted through the night, every second of dread had led to this. And now, as the first shells fell around us, I realized that counting hours was the only way I could feel some control in a place designed to take it away. Most people remember Iwo Jima for a single, powerful image: 6 Marines raising the American flag atop Mount Suribachi. What that photograph does not show, and what history often oversimplifies, is that there were actually two flag raisings on the 23rd of February 1945. The first flag was smaller, meant simply to signal to the men below that the summit had been taken. It was raised amid the chaos, a brief moment of triumph for the Marines, who had fought inch by inch to reach the peak. But the commanding officers felt it was not visible enough from the valley, and so a second, larger flag was raised. This is the flag captured in the iconic photograph and filmed by Sergeant William Genost, a Marine combat photographer. Tragically, Genost would be killed just weeks later during continued operations on the island, making his footage one of the few moving records of this moment. This dual raising detail corrects a common misunderstanding. Iwo Jima was not conquered in a single heroic moment, frozen in a photograph. The flag raisings were symbolic pauses in a relentless battle, not the climax of victory. The island itself was still fiercely contested for nearly a month afterward, with the Japanese defenders continuing to use tunnels, bunkers, and hidden positions to harass the advancing Marines. The man next to me was gone. 1 second he was there, checking his rifle like always, muttering something about the next shell, and the next, nothing. Just a hollow space where his shoulder had been. I didn't look too long. You learn quickly not to stare, not to let the sight sink in, because if you do, it lodges somewhere in your chest and doesn't leave. I just crouched lower, held my rifle, and kept moving my eyes over the line, pretending I didn't notice the empty space where he should have been. I opened my pocket notebook and wrote down his name just in case. I do this for every man I see fall, every name I can catch before memory blurs it. It's the only way I can hold on to something real, something that says they were here, they mattered. No one said much. Harris just muttered, "He's gone," like it explained everything. Jenkins didn't speak at all. We were too numb to cry, too tired to panic. The randomness of it all presses down harder than the sand in our boots, the way you can be fine 1 second and gone the next, and there's nothing you could have done. I try to focus on the next step, the next inch, but it's hard. Every breath is heavy, every movement slow. The island doesn't care who lives or dies, and neither does the clock. It just moves forward, and we move with it, carrying the names of men who should still be here. The question of Iwo Jima's value has been debated almost as fiercely as the battle itself. Some historians argue that the human cost, over 6,800 Americans killed and nearly 18,000 wounded, was staggering, and that the island could have been bypassed or neutralized with less bloodshed. From this perspective, the lives lost in February and March 1945 might not justify the strategic gains. Others point out that Iwo Jima served a critical, measurable purpose. More than 2,400 B-29 bombers made emergency landings on its airfields, saving thousands of airmen who would otherwise have been lost over Japan. From this view, the island's capture was not just symbolic, it was a lifeline that preserved American air power and directly contributed to the success of the bombing campaign. Post-war reassessments also highlight nuance. Japanese records show that Kuribayashi's defense forced the U.S. military to rethink amphibious warfare tactics, changing planning for Okinawa and the anticipated invasion of the Japanese home islands. The battle became a case study in modern defensive engineering, attrition warfare, and operational miscalculations, influencing strategy far beyond Iwo Jima itself. This debate underscores that history is rarely absolute. The numbers are real, the sacrifices undeniable, and yet the question of worth is measured differently depending on perspective. The lives lost versus the lives saved. The tactical lessons learned versus the immediate cost. Viewer engagement prompt. Knowing what we know now and seeing the costs and benefits, would you have made the same decision to take Iwo Jima? Why or why not? Iwo Jima's value has long been a point of intense debate among historians. Some argue that the human cost was immense, with over 6,800 American deaths and nearly 18,000 wounded, and that the island's capture may not have justified such losses. From this perspective, the battle exemplifies the tragic calculus of war, massive sacrifice for a goal some believe could have been achieved differently or even avoided. Other historians emphasize the tangible strategic gains. Iwo Jima's airfields became vital emergency landing sites for over 2,400 B-29 bombers, saving thousands of airmen who might otherwise have been lost on missions over Japan. These landings directly supported the sustained bombing campaign, preserving both personnel and aircraft, and arguably shortening the war. Post-war analyses further highlight that Kuribayashi's defense forced the U.S. military to reassess amphibious tactics, influencing planning for Okinawa and the anticipated invasion of Japan itself. Iwo Jima thus became not just a tactical battle but a pivotal lesson in modern defensive engineering, attrition, and operational miscalculation. The debate remains unresolved because the worth of Iwo Jima can be measured in multiple ways: lives lost, lives saved, lessons learned, and the moral weight of the decision. There is no single answer, only perspectives shaped by context, hindsight, and values. With what we know and heard about Iwo Jima now, would you have made the same decision to take Iwo Jima? If yes, why? And if no, why? Iwo Jima's value has long been a point of intense debate among historians. Some argue that the human cost was immense, with over 6,800 American deaths and nearly 18,000 wounded, and that the island's capture may not have justified such losses. From this perspective, the battle exemplifies the tragic calculus of war, massive sacrifice for a goal some believe could have been achieved differently or even avoided. Other historians emphasize the tangible strategic gains. Iwo Jima's airfields became vital emergency landing sites for over 2,400 B-29 bombers, saving thousands of airmen who might otherwise have been lost on missions over Japan. These landings directly supported the sustained bombing campaign, preserving both personnel and aircraft, and arguably shortening the war. Post-war analyses further highlight that Kuribayashi's defense forced the U.S. military to reassess amphibious tactics, influencing planning for Okinawa and the anticipated invasion of Japan itself. Iwo Jima thus became not just a tactical battle but a pivotal lesson in modern defensive engineering, attrition, and operational miscalculation. The debate remains unresolved because the worth of Iwo Jima can be measured in multiple ways: lives lost, lives saved, lessons learned, and the moral weight of the decision. There is no single answer, only perspectives shaped by context, hindsight, and values. With what we know now, would you have made the same decision to take Iwo Jima? Why or why not? March 26. They say the island is ours. Secured, the officers call it, but the ground still feels heavy under my boots, and the silence is louder than the guns ever were. For weeks, everything was fire and smoke, the roar of artillery, the screech of shells, the cries and shouts of men, and now there's nothing. Just the wind moving through shattered bunkers and the ash that never stops falling. I keep expecting a burst of gunfire, a shout, a trap, but there's only quiet. Too quiet. I pulled out my notebook again today, tried to write home, tell them I'm alive. But what can I say? Words feel hollow after what we've seen, after what we've lost. I pause over every line, trying to make it mean something, but it's all inadequate. How do you explain this? How do you describe the weight of an island that has taken so much and given so little? I walk among the men, and we exchange nods, small smiles that don't reach our eyes. Some laugh quietly, but most just look at the ground or stare at the wreckage around us. We survived. That is what I tell myself. That is what I write down. Survival feels like both a blessing and a curse. And yet, even as I set the notebook down, I can feel the memory of the battle pressing into every step. The sand, the smoke, the screams. They'll stay with me long after I leave this place. Iwo Jima stands as one of the bloodiest battles in the Pacific, a stark reminder of the human cost of war. Over 6,800 American Marines were killed, and nearly the entire Japanese garrison, an estimated 21,000 soldiers, was destroyed, their positions reduced to ash and rubble. The island's volcanic landscape still bears the scars of relentless combat: shell craters, collapsed bunkers, and twisted steel. Beyond the immediate toll, Iwo Jima served as a crucial precursor to Okinawa. Lessons learned here about amphibious assault against deeply entrenched defenses, underground fortifications, and the psychological toll on troops shaped U.S. planning for the final stages of the Pacific War. The battle forced military leaders to reconsider assumptions, adapt tactics, and recognize the limits of conventional planning against determined, strategically sophisticated defenders. These figures and insights are drawn from official USMC casualty reports and the National World War II Museum archives, ensuring that the legacy of Iwo Jima is remembered with both precision and respect. The battle is not just a story of heroism or tragedy, it is a case study in strategy, sacrifice, and the human consequences of war, providing lessons that continue to resonate today. I write these last lines with shaking hands, not sure if anyone will ever read them. The island is quiet now, too quiet, and I wonder if the words on this page will survive longer than we did. My pen pauses, and The diary ends here. The pen drops, and with it, the voice of one Marine fades into history. But these pages, these first-hand accounts, do more than record events. They humanize the statistics, the strategy, the maps and reports. They remind us that behind every number, 6,800 killed, 18,000 wounded, were men with names, fears, and fleeting moments of courage and doubt. Historians and readers alike rely on these diaries to bridge the gap between strategy and lived experience. They allow us to hear the sound of the sand under a Marine's boots, the weight of a helmet, the quiet terror before dawn. They make the history of Iwo Jima and of all wars feel real, immediate, and profoundly human. If you've read a wartime diary, or if one exists in your family, share what it revealed. These voices are how history stays human.